President Joe Biden stated at a recent press conference that American soldiers would fight to protect Taiwan from a Chinese invasion. China, who said that the US was breaking its own One China policy, expressed indignation at this right away. President Biden issued an order for US and Canadian warships to pass through the Taiwan Strait in retaliation. The US maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan for many years, never really pledging to defend the island but making it clear that it would retaliate against a Chinese invasion with military force of its own. Since China views Taiwan's reunification as important for the survival of the Chinese Communist Party as well as national pride. This has acted as a diplomatic lubricant between the China and US. Taiwan's independence and freedom are a direct rebuke to China's effort to establish itself as a superpower, a goal it has not yet accomplished. The country won't be a reliable global force if it can't defeat one rogue province right off its own coastlines. The democratic government in Taiwan poses an existential danger to the CCP's ability to maintain control over China. President Biden has now spoken it aloud, warning China that it will encounter the US military if it tries to annex Taiwan. But in the event of an invasion, what would the US actually do? Only within a 2 to 3 week window in either spring or autumn, when the tides are favorable, is it possible for China to invade Taiwan. Additionally, the beaches that are suited for the discharge of an infantry and vehicles for Chinese forces to land on are all heavily guarded and prepared with booby traps. Furthermore, an invasion would require months to plan, giving Taiwan adequate time to mine the Taiwan Strait and ample opportunities to provide notice. Even without US assistance, China is not likely to prevail in spite of its huge size advantage, since it would be the most expensive military campaign in terms of lives and resources since the pivotal battles of World War II. Taiwan is a superior strategic location that enables its lesser forces to repel Chinese armies, much as the Greeks at Thermopylae. It is unlikely that the US ground forces will participate in the combat in the event of war, but it is implausible that the US Marine and Army units may be committed to the defense of the island in limited numbers to support Taiwan's protectors. American submarines would start their deadly mission of destroying Chinese boats early in the event of a war. China still has limited anti-submarine warfare capabilities despite an increase, and US subs are excellent at blending into the background. The American Discreet Service would be responsible for confronting Chinese vessels attempting to cross the Taiwan Strait and targeting troop transports and assistance ships with deadly accuracy rather than actual warships, which would be more significant kills considering their fewer numbers. China cannot invade if it's unable to get personnel and equipment over the strait. Any ship operating in the Taiwan Strait would be at risk, and US submarine losses would occur. But losses on the Chinese side would be substantially higher. One American Ohio class submarine, outfitted with cruise missiles, would launch a deadly assault against the oil pipelines between China and Russia up north, just south of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. As a result, China would have only one option for importing oil over land, which would reduce its oil supplies. Since any contemporary economy depends on an oil to run, oil would be the key to triumph. China, on the other hand, is incredibly susceptible to trade disruption, which is largely why the US has paid little attention to China's threats. China's Achilles heels is the 60% of its trade that travels by water, which would include oil. China may boast the largest navy in the world, but size doesn't equate to the strength, and Chinese navy have some significant flaws. Its numbers are substantially inflated by smaller missile boats, and it lacks the defensive or logical resources to transfer its ships far from home. Therefore, moving China's fleet even farther out to sea would be a fatal error, even though they could still operate within Taiwan territorial waters. China has made an effort to change this by gaining more power in the South China Sea by creating artificial islands. Despite being rammed to the gills with long-range missiles and attack aircraft, these artificial floating airfields are unable to adequately defend China's international trade. Due to the need to sail through both Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, for any ship carrying oil to China, the United States has two opportunities to monetarily strangle China. US naval troops would be advancing to the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean even prior to the start of confrontations. The first line of defense against Chinese oil shipping would be American warships anchored directly outside the Gulf of Oman. The US Pacific Fleet would block off Chinese ships from the Straits of Malacca in the east. The eventual consequences would be a nearly complete oil embargo on China, leaving it dependent on the western overland pipelines from Russia, which are currently beyond the range of US weapons. In the event of war, it's implausible that the US would send B-2 Shield bombers to India and North to target these lines with standoff explosive. India is very likely to permit US bombers to operate it in the airspace for the operation, given in the extremely tense relations between India and China. Even if these oil pipelines weren't hit, China's oil import would be limited to a trickle, which would have an immediate negative impact on its economy and only get worse over time. If you've ever wondered why China hasn't truly occupied Taiwan, it's mostly because the US Navy has its foot on China's throat and only needs to apply slight pressure to kill the nation's economy. While it's true that the US forces won't attack the China if they just implement a block trade strategy, US carriers will undoubtedly join the battle in the air over Taiwan. The sole purpose for which US air forces will engage with Chinese troops is to achieve America's primary goals in the event of conflict with China, which include destroying China's air and naval assets in order to eliminate it as a future threat. US Air Forces fighters might enter the battle over Taiwan with the help of aerial tankers flying out of the bases in Korea and Japan. US Navy aviators engaged in combat with Chinese forces would do so from aircraft ships in the Pacific. However, Chinese ballistic missile attacks on American ships pose a real threat, which is why the US Navy is working to significantly increase the fighting radius of its jets. The airframe of the Navy's next generation fighter, which is already in the development, will need to be much bigger than F-18 Hornet or F-35 since it must have a combat range increase up to 50%. However, the Navy is also creating a fleet of drone tanker planes that can support fighters and refuel them just before they can approach combat ranges in the meantime. The majority, but not all, of China's long-range missiles would be out of the range of US ships thanks to this. However, this is the best at stopgap solution since as missile technology advances, the range of weapons get longer and longer. However, the US continues to believe that in the event of conflict, it can operate its carrier in the Pacific. Ballistic missiles can be defeated by fleet air defense ships like Aegis cruisers thanks to their complement of SM-3 missiles, which can intercept ballistic missiles outside of Earth's atmosphere. US carriers have a top speed of 35 miles per hour, which is extremely fast for a vessel of size to aid its own defense. American supercarriers with top speeds that are classified are known to be able to go much more quickly than this when necessary. Despite the fact that 35 mph may not seem like much when you're shooting at a ship hundreds of miles away from a launch location, this means that by the time your weapon gets close to the ship originally coordinates, it's already long since moved on. Because of this, contemporary long-range munitions necessitate very powerful monitoring, tracking, and targeting tools including satellites, AWACS, aircraft, subsea centers, and drones. Each of these components is a link in a lengthy kill chain wherein platforms supply an approaching missile while targeting information. The ability of China to target US ships at sea has improved greatly, but it is still unknown if China's kill chain can withstand hostile engagement with the US forces. By no means are US supercarriers secure. In fact, the platform is probably out of date, and we should seriously consider abandoning it in favor of more modestly sized carriers that would make the US Navy less susceptible to a single attack's catastrophic losses. China will find itself up against the most sophisticated aerospace forces in the world once American fighters take the skies. But this does not make US aircraft immune to attack. In fact, China has PL-15 air-to-air missile, which has a higher range more than the US currently has. Chinese jets have upper hand in the first look shoot engagement thanks to the missile's somewhat longer range than the American AIM-120D AMRAAM. This is projected to change in the next years as the US deploys the AIM-260 missile with a classified range that is thought to be able to travel at least 300 kilometers, which is the probable range of China's own next-generation missile, the PL-21. In order to really engage US fighters, China must first identify them. For this reason, the US will use a fleet of 5th-generation stealth aircraft as its spearhead. Although not radar invisible, China's frontline jets are now unable to engage American F-35s and F-22s until they are around 35 miles, that is, 56 kilometers away, eliminating China's modest advantage in a long-range air-to-air missiles. Long before the Chinese are aware of their presence, American fighters would be firing. However, it has severe weakness. It has limited payload capacity. A US F-35 can only carry 4 AIM-120s and 2 sidewinders when flying in the stealth mode. This is concerning considering that China might send multiple aircrafts into the battle at once. Despite the fact that the US stealth planes would be able to disable China's frontline fighters' defenses, it is improbable that they would be able to get close enough to Chinese bombers that were launching deadly standoff assaults against the Taiwanese target. To do this, US fighters would need to fly in an assassination configuration with all their missiles mounted at the wing pylons, obliterating their shield signatures. The US should be concerned about China's own stealth fighters. When compared to F-22, F-35 and Russia S-257, the Chengdu J-20 is a subpar 5th-generation fighter and near the bottom of the heap. Canards and engine outlets are unquestionably not stealthy characters. It is assumed that less effective radar-absorbent materials were used in its construction. Furthermore, only 150 of these aircrafts are operated by China. Therefore, it is restricted number availability. However, even subpar stealth is still stealth, and Chinese J-20s would represent a significant threat to America air support assets like tankers and AWACs, both of which are crucially platforms that are desperately needed for contemporary air battles. Armed with long-range PL-15 missiles, J-20 could have easily avoided being detected by the American AWACs while firing their missiles, but guaranteeing the destruction of these priceless air assets. The fact that Chinese aircraft would be flying so close to American soil and within easy range and naval-based air defenses would make the US lack of concrete solution to it. This solution seems even more serious. Aerial conflict over Taiwan would eventually become one of the attrition, which the US would ultimately prevail in, but not before suffering enormous casualties, including those of its priceless 5th-generation aircraft. The earlier American people realized that F-22 and F-35 are not indestructible. The better equipped they will be to accept the battlefield defeats and maintain their resolve to fight. China would seek to eliminate the US from the conflict not through the superior military force, but rather by undermining public support of war. The American people don't have much appetite for yet another drawn-on military campaign against a foe who may not necessarily be threatening them after 20 years of calamitous adventurism in the Middle East. China believes that it can shock the American people and knock out the United States to its knees by inflicting significant losses. However, the United States defending Taiwan is crucial to national security. By giving China the power to breach the first island chain of containment, allowing the island's nation to fall to China would seriously damage US control in the Pacific, a barrier to China naval development into the Pacific. This series of islands extends from Japan to the Philippines and helms in China. Taiwan is significant to the US and free world as a whole for a different reason. Microchips and other computer components are currently produced in large quantities in the island. The Chinese would become the largest worldwide supplier of these essential parts for the contemporary industry and militaries if this manufacturing capability were to pass into their hands. China would also become the largest producer of these components. A serious damage to Russia's capacity to produce new precision weapons was dealt by Taiwanese embargo alone. China would virtually have the power to use the blackmail or intimidation to force any other country, including the United States, to do what it wants if it were in the charge of the global production of computer components. You must comply with China's demand in order to avoid losing access to the vital resources required to maintain your modern economy. Even European nations have vowed some support for Taiwan's continued independence in response to the strategic threat, which is such importance. The world's reaction to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, fortunately for Taiwan, has significantly slowed down China's desire to annex Taiwan. China has seen how far the West will go to resist the aggression of dictatorial governments against free states thanks to the unexpected response from the West. However, the Russian invasion of Ukraine completely wrecked such preparations. According to rumors that China was actually going to launch military operations this autumn. China does not want to become a second pharaoh in the world, especially given the impending internal economic catastrophes that would affect its own economy severely. That's all for today, folks. Take care of yourself. Give us your thoughts on this in the comment section. And if you appreciate our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with your friends and family. We'll meet you soon in the next video. Thank you. Jai Hind.